All right, welcome back everyone to the long-awaited next edition of our brand new podcast, Did You Know Genesee County History? I'm Ryan Duffy, the director of the Holland Land Office Museum, and again joining me is Rachel Bellis, our curator at the museum.
Hello.
So we're very excited to share another story, or in this case, a lot of stories related to the history of Genesee County. This one will branch out a little bit more than just the county boundaries. So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and talk about the development of the area of Western New York through the lens of the Holland Land Company and its importance in that process. So we are going to track the history of the development of the land pretty much from the 18th century all the way up through the mid-19th century until we kind of get to our modern boundaries that we recognize today.
That's true. And I just want to give a little background if there's anyone who's listening or watching who doesn't know Western New York. So we are currently in the Holland Land Office Museum. It was from this building that all of Western New York was the land was parceled out. So we are going to be discussing the history of that and the development of Western New York, like Ryan said.
Yes, so centered here in Batavia, but we are going to talk a wider area than just that. So when we use the term Western New York, it'll probably shift throughout this talk, but I will be sure to make sure you know what boundaries we're referring to as we go through. So we will get started at the very beginning. So we are going to go all the way back to 1786. So right after the end of the Revolutionary War and independence, but before the Constitution. The area that we know of as New York is very different in terms of its boundaries. Officially, New York only goes up to Seneca Lake in the Finger Lakes. Everything west of that is actually disputed territory between New York and Massachusetts because both of their colonial charters said it was theirs.
Right.
So we actually have two states that have to sign a treaty to figure out their own boundaries and who has what. So eventually they signed what's called the Treaty of Hartford that year. And it's actually a very magnanimous treaty and both sides get what they want. Massachusetts is given the preemption rights and the rights to dispossess any Native Americans in the area and make the money from the sale because they were heavily in debt from the war. But once the sale is made, it becomes part of New York State. So New York State is going to administer anybody who lives there or owns the property after Massachusetts sells it, and which is good for them because they always needed more land because there's a lot of people moving west. And they had made promises to people of payment of land for military service that they were running out of the required amount. So it was a win-win for both parties, but that's where this all begins. So actually where we are in Batavia was Massachusetts for a little bit, at least in name on a title.
So we're talking about very early days of America, right? So the states are, what you're talking about is the states are sort of figuring out amongst themselves where their boundaries lies. They hadn't been sort of solidified under the British.
So the colonial charters went all the way to the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
They didn't necessarily know how far that was, but they knew there was an ocean on the other side.
Gotcha.
So every single colony's charter said they could go all the way. The problem is they started running into each other.
Right.
New York kind of throws that off from New England because it kind of cuts it off essentially. So you have Connecticut has this little tract out in northeast Ohio that technically they had, but then it becomes Ohio. So this happens pretty much with every one of the original colonies that once they become states, they quickly realize we don't want to go that far west.
Right.
There is a limit to this, and New York and Massachusetts run into the same issue. So it's just one of the many stories involved around that, but it's local to us. So the preemption line that runs through Seneca Lake, actually, if Chemung, New York, it's along the 77th parallel, but they actually screwed up the first preemption line because they went 1 mile west of the lake, but it's originally, the line really does go through the lake.
Gotcha.
So they had to be modified a little bit after that, but that's the line that we're talking about in terms of the disputed land that now Massachusetts is trying to sell.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
the first purchaser comes in 2 years later. Oliver Phelps and Nathaniel Gorham, who were prominent businessmen from Massachusetts.
So what year are we in now?
1788.
88. Okay.
And they were members of the Constitutional Convention. Gorham was actually president of the convention for a time. So these guys were prominent individuals, and they agreed to purchase all 6 million acres.
Wow. Okay.
So the entire swath for $1 million. And they were required to pay that $1 million in 3 equal installments.
Okay.
And they were, with that purchase, it was their job to extinguish the rights of the Native Americans so that they could sell the land. So they were in negotiations with the Seneca essentially throughout the entire area, both the Finger Lakes and west of the Genesee River.
Mm-hmm.
However, in that process, they made the first payment but failed to make the second payment and actually defaulted.
Gotcha.
So what they really end up settling or surveying is the eastern third, which is basically Seneca Lake, the preemption line, to essentially the Genesee River. It's not a perfect boundary because the Genesee River likes to snake a lot. It's not a perfect straight line. But to give you a good idea of sort of the area we're talking about is basically Seneca Lake to the Genesee River.
Okay, got it.
They did sign a treaty with the Seneca of that region for $5,000 to give up the land and be moved off. This is going to pop up again, but that's the first one. They were in process of trying to negotiate with the Seneca farther west, but that never materialized because they defaulted.
Right. Okay.
So what becomes known as the Phelps-Gorham Purchase was originally the whole thing, but really in our modern times, it's the eastern 2/3, which was about 2.25 million acres.
Okay, so still a very big chunk of land.
Yes. And these properties go back to then what's left goes back to Massachusetts.
Okay, because they defaulted.
Yes.
They weren't able to pay off the land.
So they paid off a third.
Okay.
So that Massachusetts took over the other 2/3.
So at this point, Massachusetts has from the Genesee River to Lake Erie.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So
Well, in the sense of that they can sell it.
right.
They're not really administering anything because once it's sold, it goes to New York.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
So they're basically a landlord waiting to sell the property.
Got it. Okay.
And then they don't have to deal with it anymore. So the next buyer that comes in is Robert Morris, who is another founding father. We've actually talked about him before, so I won't go through every detail
Yes.
of him. You can go to the second episode of the podcast and listen more about him.
We have lots on Robert Morris.
Yes. So he is the richest man in the country at this time. He's a signer of the Declaration, the Constitution. He was the first superintendent of finance, was Washington's first pick to be Secretary of the Treasury, but he turns it down.
Wasn't he Navy as well, the Secretary of the Navy or something
Well,
like that? Or what existed?
before that existed, but yeah, he was in charge of the Navy during the Revolutionary War, at least in terms of logistics.
Gotcha.
So very important man to the early United States, and decided following his time in Congress and things, land speculation was going to be his thing. And he got involved in a lot of areas around the country, but one area was right here in our backyard.
That was a pretty common thing amongst the founding fathers, right? Because we talk about Robert Morris, we talk about Phelps and Gorham, and then George Washington also was into land speculation.
At this time, land is money. That's where your
Yes.
wealth is in how much property you own, because then you can use it for other things. It gives you monetary crops, hopefully, that you can then, expand upon. So yeah, you had to have land to be wealthy, unless you were, wrapped up completely in city life and mercantile, which that's what Morris was actually. But then,
But that gave him the money to do the land speculation.
Yes. So
Understood.
and there's a lot of open land after the Revolution. So there was this opportunity that was seen.
Yeah.
So Morris purchases what's left. 3.75 million acres from Massachusetts, but he pays it off, so he takes ownership. So Massachusetts is essentially out of the picture now.
Okay.
They've done their part. So now Morris buys 3.75 million acres, sight unseen, never comes here, buys all this land because he wants to flip it and make a profit. So he's not interested in doing anything with the land. He just wants to find somebody to buy it at a higher price so he makes his money back.
Okay. And was there the demand, do you think, of people wanting to move westward continuously?
Oh, yes. I mean, that was part of the contention of the Revolutionary War, is the British weren't letting people move farther west.
Right.
So that now this is open, people want to, but he's looking for a big fish. He's not looking for a bunch of little farmers to come. He wants somebody to buy the whole thing in one chunk.
Okay.
And then he's done with it. He makes his money. He can go on to another venture.
Gotcha.
So he's just house flipping. That's what he's doing. He's buying to sell. That's what he's doing.
But instead of one house, it's millions of acres.
Yes, yes. That's 1791.
Okay.
Later that year and into the next, he starts making negotiations with a fellow named Theophilus Casanova, who is the general agent of the newly formed Holland Land Company in the Netherlands. So the land company was, in simple terms, 6 Dutch banking houses that were very wealthy, started a new venture of land speculating. They saw an opportunity of this new open land in the United States and wanted to get a piece of the action.
Okay.
So they pool their money together, they hire Casanova, send him over to Philadelphia, and he kind of makes that his headquarters. Well, that was sort of the center of the United States at this time. It was the capital. It was where, if you were somebody, you were in Philadelphia at this time.
Right.
And he starts talking with Morris about this opportunity of, hey, I've got land to sell, you're looking for land to buy, let's talk.
Right.
And by the end of 1792, they come to an agreement that the Holland Land Company will buy at least a large portion of it.
Okay. Do we know how much of that?
So the
land
eventual
buying?
agreement is $3.25 million. So
Okay.
Morris decides that he's going to keep 500,000 acres, which becomes known as the Morris Reserve.
Okay.
Essentially, like
Where is that?
so that would be the eastern part of that, of what Morris buys. So basically, the Genesee River to almost Batavia.
Okay. Got it.
It's a long strip from Lake Ontario all the way down to the Pennsylvania border, and this whole purchase, that's the boundaries.
Got
And
it.
then Lake Erie to pretty much the Genesee River. And so he decides to keep some, basically as an insurance policy that he can sell later once things get developed and it's worth more money.
Got it. So he's just sitting on a little chunk, a little parcel.
Yeah,
in
just
case he
just
needs to-
500,000 acres.
Just
That's
half
all.
a mil.
But however, this agreement doesn't go into effect right away.
Mm-hmm.
There is one problem for them, but a very big piece of this is the Seneca that remain in Western New York.
Right.
And
So there's all this dealing happening, but then there's, without sort of consideration of, there are people already living here
Yes.
that have.
so
sort
when
of
we are
birthrights.
talking about ownership of the land,
Yes.
technically there's 2 perspectives here.
Right.
The Seneca, the indigenous population, has their ownership, which cannot be ignored, and they have rightful ownership, but it's up to Morris and now the Holland Land Company to dispossess
Right.
in order so they can take ownership and sell it.
So they sort of are offering prices that maybe the Seneca can't refuse at the time.
That's essentially, well, they want to offer as little as possible.
Right. Yes.
That it follows the trend of U.S. history of keep pushing farther west and removal of the indigenous populations so that they can take over the land.
Right. And I think at this time the Seneca were sort of in, pretty dire straits of a lot of the population.
They were in a rough
was a pretty
spot,
small
to put
population.
it lightly.
Yeah.
The Sullivan campaign of the Revolution had really diminished their power, their population. So they were not in a position to resist.
Right.
So the only way that they could resist was at the negotiation table.
Right.
And though Morris and the Holland Land Company have an agreement, they have to get the Seneca at the table in order to make it legal, formal. So there's no issues of dispute of who owns what.
Understood. So now they are coming to the negotiating table.
But this doesn't happen for 5 years.
Okay.
It takes a long time to get this together. And in this time, the land company is preparing for hopefully this thing, so they hire Joseph Ellicott to be the surveyor once they take ownership. So he's in place before they take ownership, but there's nothing for him to do yet. He's just waiting. And that moment comes in 1797.
Okay.
So starting on August 20th at Big Tree, there was a Seneca town called Big Tree right outside of Geneseo. So basically a little west of Geneseo is where this would take place,
Okay.
if you're familiar with Geneseo today. But right along the river there. So this becomes a mass meeting place. Over 300 chiefs and leaders of the Seneca come. This includes people like Red Jacket, Mary Jemison is there, Handsome Lake Corn Planter. All of these major leaders are there. You have the Morris delegation, which is represented by Robert Morris's son, Thomas.
Right.
Because again, Robert Morris isn't coming here. He sends his son to be his negotiator. The Holland Land Company is there, represented by Cazenove, Paolo Buste, who eventually takes over for Cazenove. Ellicott is there. There's some interpreters there. And then the last piece of the puzzle is the Wadsworth brothers and family, who have sort of settled in that area. They're the only sort of people there. And they are tabbed by George Washington to sort of be overseers and represent the federal government in a way to keep everything above board as best by that time standards.
Understood.
So the United States is not part of the negotiations. They are not a signer in this. They are there to basically witness it.
Okay, got it.
So this really is a treaty between private entities and the Seneca people.
Understood.
So the negotiations take almost a month before a treaty is finally signed. A lot of deliberation going back and forth. Red Jacket is really the prime opponent trying to fight against it because he sees how this is going to affect his people. Several of the chiefs are ready to sign right away because they just see the short-term benefits, but also they don't know what else to do. So this gets drawn out, and eventually they come to the agreement of setting aside reservations, which was not necessarily an initial goal, especially by Morris and them. They were like, we want it all. But eventually a negotiation happens where 10 reservations are set up in those territories that are deemed to be important to the Seneca people, at least in that scope. And this comes out to 200,000 acres.
Okay.
So out of that 3.75, 2,000 are now being set aside across 10 reservations where the Seneca will be living.
Is it 2,000 or 200,000?
Sorry, 200,000.
200,000.
Hopefully I
Okay.
said it right the first time, but 200,000, yes.
Gotcha.
And they are then given some cattle and some agricultural stuff, along with $100,000 in U.S. bonds, which are really worth nothing at this point. And by the end of the whole timeline of this, they only receive about half.
Oh, that's rough.
So those reservations, you have 6 along the Genesee River, including the Gardeau Reservation, which is now Letchworth State Park for the most part. That was Mary Jemison's reservation. She goes there as a clan mother and eventually gets her own reservation out of it, which she was not supposed to receive anything in these negotiations, and actually gets one of the larger pieces. And then there are 4 farther west, the Tonawanda, which is near us here in Batavia, the Buffalo Creek, which encompassed really the middle section of modern-day Erie County, almost across the whole way, the Cattaraugus, which is Silver Creek, Irving area, and then Allegheny, which is where Salamanca is today.
Right.
Now, all of these reservations that still exist were much larger. They were slowly eaten away at. The Buffalo Creek was completely sold off by the 1840s, which was the largest one, which was almost half of the total acreage. And unfortunately, a lot of it was lost due to greed, essentially, and backroom treaties that were not done well. Luckily, the Tonawanda was even able to fight some of these things as they were supposed to be sent off to Kansas. So the Seneca were supposed to be moved completely. They were able to fight and actually won a Supreme Court case to sell off the land they were supposed to have in Kansas, use that money to buy back their original reservation land here in Western New York. That's a story for another time.
Story,
We'll get into that in maybe another episode. But so the Treaty of Big Tree is signed. Now the land company can officially take over, start surveying, and start selling. So Ellicott is now brought on to survey all of that property. And he's now working for the Holland Land Company.
Okay, got it.
Now the land company, there's 6 main individuals in this. They're not super important as individuals to the story, but they were all heavy Dutch bankers who had a lot of money.
Right.
Some of them had already dealings in the United States during the Revolution in terms of lending money or trading and things, so they had an idea and they wanted to expand upon that. So the Holland Land Company now has ownership, and we get a very Dutch feeling. So those individuals, the names, you have Vollenhoven, Schimmelpenninck, Van Eegen, Van Staphorst, and the one that probably shows up the most is Willink, as a town gets named after him, and he actually signs a lot more deeds because he lived the longest and bought his own pieces of property within this.
Gotcha.
So he's a very important in terms of just continuing that line. But they're really just the guys with the money.
Right.
They don't come here. They're just supporting it and making the financial gain.
Right. So the Dutch influence is really only felt in the place names around Western New York. We have obviously Batavia, which is a Dutch name.
Yes. I mean, there's Holland, New York.
Holland, New York.
Buffalo was called New Amsterdam for a little bit.
Right.
Then it goes right back to Buffalo. But so there, some of that shows up. The early streets of Buffalo are named after those individuals. Like Schimmelpenninck Street is way too hard, so I'm glad it got changed. But but you don't have, this is not Dutch colonial settlement like you have in the Hudson Valley.
Right.
This is purely Dutch money supporting development.
Right.
And they're supporting development because they want people to come and buy the land.
Right. They don't want to hold on to it forever.
No.
They don't want a colony again.
So there's not any altruism in this.
Right.
If we're being perfectly honest, it's about making money.
Got it.
This is a capital effort. So Ellicott now comes in to survey what is 3.25 million acres. And he's got a big job ahead of him. He's stationed in Philadelphia at this time, the winter before, figuring all of this out.
Okay.
So he hires 150 men to be on his teams. This includes surveyors, as well as cattle drivers, cooks, all of that, even axemen to cut down trees so they can make survey lines.
Right. So this is, at the time, pretty forested area, right?
Yes, it's
wilderness.
virgin territory.
Okay. So this is a big undertaking.
Yes. But Ellicott was a seasoned surveyor. His family, I call him the first family of American surveying. His older brother Andrew finished the outline of Washington, D.C., which Joseph assisted with.
Yeah.
Joseph went down and actually did the boundary between Georgia and Spanish Florida at that time.
Okay.
Andrew, following the War of 1812, did the northern boundary between British Canada and the United States. So basically, if there was a boundary in the United States, it was probably surveyed by an Ellicott.
Okay. So the Holland Land Company found the best man for the job.
Exactly. So Joseph, while he's in Philadelphia, he's trying to get his team together and figuring everything out. And one of his big claims of fame happens at this point. He's running into an issue is that he doesn't have a lot of standardized units. Yes, he's got his surveyor chains for everybody, but in terms of something they can all base it off of, he doesn't really have that.
Okay.
Because standardized unit of measurement's still not really a thing in many cases. And the unit that's used is called the foot, which stays over from our English days. Now, a foot was supposed to be based off the king's foot.
So it could change.
Yes. We also don't even have a king anymore, so why are we using the king's foot?
Right.
So Ellicott has this issue of he has this unit of measurement of the foot, but a foot could be whatever.
Right.
So he says, I want to make the foot standardized for my guys. So what he does is he goes around Philadelphia and collects all the foot-long rulers he can find. brings them together, takes the average, and it comes out to 12 inches.
Okay.
And to this day, it is still 12 inches
Because of Joseph Elliott.
because of Joseph Elliott.
Very interesting.
So we call ourselves the home of the 12-inch ruler as well. So what he does is for each of his teams, he creates a brass 12-inch ruler so that they can use that to at least have something to base off of if everything else fails.
Okay.
So they're not going around just measuring with a 12-inch ruler every foot. They're going, no, but to figure out if we're off anything, we can use that to get us back on track.
Okay. Got it.
Or to make sure that our chain links are fully stretched, that it's something to measure against.
Right.
I wish we had one of those 12-inch bronze rulers because they would be very important to our story, but I don't know if any have ever survived past that time.
One day, maybe in some
One day.
dusty attic somewhere.
Maybe they'll show up. So now it's called the Great Survey because it is a major undertaking. Ellicott and his team start off, and he's got really two teams. His younger brother Benjamin takes the eastern boundary, and another man, Thompson, takes the center line, essentially. They're lucky in that the boundaries, there's our meridian lines, which are lines of longitude, that they know where they are, because they can use them based on the stars and astrological. So they've got some areas to work out. So they got to get those done first, and then they can branch off of that.
Okay.
Because Ellicott's lotting system was basically to create six little squares, little townships that are each a square that are 6 miles by 6 miles.
Okay.
So, but he's got to have starting points in order to do that.
Right.
So Benjamin had some issues going up the eastern boundary because he tries going up the river to make it faster, and he finds that's just not working, so they got to go by land. And there is a little jog because of some boundaries, so it's not a perfectly straight line.
Got it.
But if you're familiar with Genesee County, we have Transit Road in Stafford. That is the eastern boundary line.
Okay.
But it goes all the way down and jogs a little over and then goes all the way up.
Got it.
In the middle, they've got another meridian line that they can work off of. And they follow that basically all the way up. They start in the southern tier and go all the way up to Lake Ontario. And if you're familiar with Transit Road in the Buffalo area, that's another transit line. That's why it's called Transit Road.
Really? Oh my God, I didn't know that.
If you've ever driven it, you know it's pretty straight north-south. That's because it's on a transit line.
That's fast. I kind of always wondered where the name came from, so now I know.
Now you know. So there's actually markers on both ends to denote that. They are not in their original spot. Mm-hmm. The one in the southern tier was in Allegheny State Park. It's now in their museum, so it's been moved from the original location. And the one on the northern shore, due to erosion from Lake Ontario, actually would have been in the lake by now.
Oh, got it.
So it's now at the Newfane Historical Society. So they've both been saved, but they're large rocks with plaques on them that say, all this information. But if you go around the wooded areas or the backwoods of Western New York, you will find stone markers that have HLC on them, Holland Land Company. Those are survey markers denoting points, because they would go every mile and make a marker.
Okay.
So in some places they were spot on, and in some places they got miles off because it just happened. So going down the line in the 1850s, New York State went back and started resurveying it to correct anything. And there were spots that had to be corrected. It was not perfect.
That makes sense. They're doing this with chains and rulers.
Yes. Joseph's younger brother Benjamin had to create a mobile transit because there was only one in the entire United States at that point, and their older brother was using it on another surveying thing, so they had to create one more. So it was two, and it was the Ellicotts that were using it. So we're going way back in terms of technology. No lasers, no GPS satelliting. This was all on the ground, and it was pretty spot on. And in this survey, he also has to lay out those reservations that we talked about. He also measures the height of Niagara Falls. He's the first person to do that. He lays out the early village of Buffalo. And by the end of it, he ends up here in Batavia and founds Batavia and lays it out. So accomplished a lot in 3 years.
Not bad.
And he was ticked off because he wanted to do it in 2.
Why did it take him 3? Just
it was I think it was a larger project than he thought it was going to take. There was also bad winters that really slowed everything down. I mean, they were at the mercy of the elements this entire time.
That's Western New York for you.
Exactly. The weather's always been this way. Don't worry. So now that Ellicott has the survey, they can start selling it. They keep Ellicott on as the resident agent. So he is the field agent here in Batavia. He reports to Paulo Buste, who is in the, I'll call it the national office in Philadelphia, and they report back to Amsterdam. So that's sort of how this process works.
And then Casanova is not in the picture anymore.
He has been relieved of his duties.
Okay.
It turns out he liked to party more than do his job. He just liked to be a socialite was really what he wanted to do. So he just would smooth with everybody in Philadelphia and they'd be like, hey, what have you done? He'd be like, and then they said, we'll get somebody else out.
Well, lucky for him, a couple places are named after him too. So
anything Casanova is named after him.
And there's a town, right? Isn't it
out near Syracuse, because they had a satellite office out there.
That's so funny.
So the people that eventually get targeted to sell to are actually New England farmers and those from Eastern New York.
Okay.
So they set up an office in Vermont and then sort of near Syracuse as ways to attract people where they can go to purchase their land or see what's available and then make the trek.
Okay.
But these people are usually making their purchases sight unseen.
Wow. And then just on the assurances of these...
They're told it's a great spot. It's got all these...
All the stuff you
So when
need.
Ellicott did the survey, he did all the topography, he did all the resource management, so he could say, if you're on this lot, there's X, Y, and Z there.
Yeah. Didn't he even do like soil tests and things like that?
So he could tell you what could grow there well.
Wow.
The beauty of our area is that the soil was so good that pretty much anything that was available at the time could grow.
Right.
With the right, treatment. Depended not across the board, but for the most part, the soil was very good. So yeah, they were just trying to attract. And Ellicott was like, we're going to get huge landowners to come, and this is going to be done quick. That didn't happen. They ended up selling it essentially one lot at a time.
Wow. Yeah.
And that was about 100 acres at a time. So you think about 3 1/4.
Yeah.
Selling 100 acres at a time, that's going to take a long time.
Right. There's millions to get through.
There's at least hundreds of thousands to get through. And that's if people can pay everything off and do everything they need to do to take ownership of the land.
Yeah.
Because they'll be happy when they get to sign a deed over and it's not theirs anymore. So the office here in Batavia is the first. Mm-hmm. The first properties that Ellicott sells, he actually sells while staying in Buffalo for a little bit, because that's where he sort of ends up after the survey. Then he spends one winter at the Asa Ransom Tavern in Clarence, because that was literally the only civilization around, the only establishment.
Yeah.
And then eventually makes it to Batavia. But there was no settlement here where Batavia is located. He decides to set up shop here for a few different reasons. And again, these are sort of outside observations. First, we are near the eastern boundary of the purchase. So people are not traveling all the way through to get to the office to then go to their spot.
Right.
They're picking them up kind of before they get too far.
Got it.
Second, we are at the bend in the Tonawanda Creek, which had been a natural meeting place for the Seneca for a long time before that.
So the current Main Street and Ellicott Street that run through Batavia are sort of following those indigenous paths, right?
Yes, and then it was already at sort of a confluence of trails.
Right.
So it was somewhat easy to get to, especially in the wilderness.
Right.
So he decides to set up shop here. This is where he's going to make his base of operations. He builds a small log cabin sort of on the site of our current museum and where the office is.
Okay.
Right along the creek to be his temporary. Eventually, when he starts building his mansion across the street, that becomes the temporary office of the land company where he starts selling. And his final permanent office is 1815 in the stone structure where the museum is housed.
Yes, right here.
Yes. And Ellicott is in charge of the land company here in Batavia until 1821.
Okay.
He is eventually relieved of his duties. He's asked to resign because at that point he had made plenty of enemies in Albany, and the land company did not want that.
Yes, I do know that about him that he really he did not want to get involved in politics and sort of had to in order to fulfill his duties as the representative of the Holland Land Company.
Yes.
So he was kind of not happy about it, didn't like it, wasn't very good at it maybe.
Well, he he didn't mind being in politics if people listened to him.
Yes.
Which
yeah.
didn't always happen. Because Ellicott is really the father of this area because a lot of it's created through his efforts.
Right.
Like he founds Batavia, which, short sidebar, Batavia was not going to be the original name.
Yeah, wasn't it going to be something else?
So
Amsterdam?
No, Ellicott wanted to name it after Paul Boosty, his boss. So
right, yeah.
he promoted Boostyville. No.
Thank God.
And then
Thank God for
Boosty
that
said, no,
clarification.
name it after you. So they almost went with Ellicottstown, and then they switched to Batavia, which was an area in the Netherlands, actually.
Right,
And
to sort of flatter the egos of their
yes,
investors.
Yes. But he also founded Genesee County,
Right.
which was created in 1802, right after the establishment of this, and it encompassed the entire area.
Right.
So he had to be a representative of Genesee County to New York State because there was a lot less counties back then than there are now.
Right.
So Ellicott was involved in politics from the beginning. He was the first county judge. All of that was him, but eventually he wasn't getting his way, and it caused issues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this revolves around the Erie Canal.
Right. Yeah.
He had plans for that weren't followed, but he tried to stay out in some ways, but couldn't help himself in others.
Right.
And eventually DeWitt Clinton, then governors, they got into a major spat, and Boosty said, you're hurting us more than you're helping us.
Right.
So please step aside.
Yes.
So he resigns in 1821, and this causes major issues for him personally. He has a mental breakdown, essentially, and his family ends up sending him to an insane asylum in New York City, where he commits suicide in 1826.
Yeah. So a sad end for a man who really brought this area to life.
Yes, but the land company continues on. As I mentioned, the area is all Genesee County to start, but from 1806 to 1841, we go from 1 county to 8 in our general area. Allegheny County being the first, and then Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, and Niagara County a few years later. And then Erie County splits off from Niagara County, because Niagara County was much bigger. And then Orleans, and then finally Wyoming.
Gotcha. So that just comes about from people realizing, oh, this area is too big to govern properly.
It's the growth of population. Once an area sort of hits a population mark, it is then split off.
Got it.
So you have to hit that mark, and then once you do, you can become your own county.
Got it.
And as that grows, then the land office starts putting satellite offices in each county. You had one down in Angelica, Ellicottville, named after Ellicott, Mayville and Chautauqua, Buffalo, Lockport, and essentially Orleans and Wyoming get left out because they're a little too close to Batavia, and they're kind of at the back end. Wyoming County really doesn't become a separate county until the very end of the Holland Land Company.
Okay.
So people could then go to those offices to take care of their business or to buy land. So they were expanding the operation. But in this, they're also having to build the first roads so people can get where they can get to go.
Right.
They're setting aside property for mills, churches, eventually schools. So all of those integral pieces, taverns, which were huge because people had to be able to stay somewhere and, have a drink while they do it. So all of that is built up from the land company because they want to attract people.
Got it.
And they have to have these necessary things for people to come. And that's the process that keeps going until really the land company ceases operations.
Okay. Have they sold off everything, or they're just like, we can't do this anymore piecemeal like this?
So eventually they run into it's not becoming as profitable as it should be. Mm-hmm. So in the 1820s, they have others take over with the boon of the Erie Canal finally coming through. That brings in a whole new influx of settlers and people looking to buy land. This is where we get our influx of sort of the immigrant populations. Because the first round was mostly New England and Eastern New York, Eastern Pennsylvania farmers.
Right.
They're moving west looking for better land or more land that they can't get where they're at.
Right.
And then by the late 1820s and 1830s, you start to have your Irish immigrants. The first round of German immigrants are a big one that coming through looking for a new life. And so they're coming all the way west, taking the canal all the way, or the roads all the way, and setting up shop here. Some then move on farther west. You see these like jumping off points, and you see Batavias start to pop up other places eventually. So you see this western migration that just keeps going. But this was the original western frontier.
Right.
It's the first stop for a lot of people. Some stayed, some kept going. Some family members stayed, some kept going. So it's just often one piece of the puzzle, but you can trace a lot of things back here. We have people from all over the country say, oh, my family was from so-and-so. And like, well, they actually came all the way here and then kept going. So there's a lot of trace to happen in that. And the land company keeps on selling. They don't sell off every portion, every parcel. As time goes on, they start to sell off things to other land companies, other institutions, the Ogden Land Company being a big one.
Yeah.
The Morris Reserve eventually gets split up into other parcels, things like the Triangle Tract or the Connecticut Tract for people who live in there. Mostly Monroe and Livingston County, but some of Orleans, Wyoming, and Genesee County today are within that portion. So they weren't part of the original Holland Land purchase.
Got it.
And things continue to grow and develop more. But by the 1830s, New York State is looking at foreign entities who own property in the United States with a much more closer eye.
Got it.
And are starting to ramp up the taxes.
Got it.
And this freaks out the Holland Land Company because we're going to owe a lot of money if we still own this land. So they push a more aggressive collection policy in terms of you need to pay us.
When you say you are.
Yes.
Because these are sort of individual farmers. Maybe they don't have a lot of liquid assets.
And back in the beginning, because it was a struggle for Ellicott, he was accepting sometimes livestock as payment or as little as a quarter down payment when an acre was sometimes $2.50.
Wow.
And that was for their entire purchase of 100 acres. So like they really had to step it up. And at first this actually worked really well because people were like, oh, if I have the money, I now own it and it's my land. So the land company wanted to sell it off so they don't have to pay taxes on it. And these people wanted their land so that they had ownership and they could do what they want with it. They didn't have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
So it was, for a little bit, it was good. And then sort of there's an economic downturn around 1836. Things start to get a little worse. People are having trouble making those payments. And rivals of the Holland Land Company start to rile them up and say, hey, look at how bad they're treating you, when there probably wasn't that much of a difference. But so these sort of congresses start to pop up around Western New York saying, hey, you need to treat us better. And the land company is like, we're doing what we said we were going to do. No, thank you. We're going to do what we need to do. And at this point, the agent in charge is David Ellicott Evans, who was Joseph's nephew.
Okay.
The Evans family, his father, that's where we get the town of Evans from, south of Buffalo, very influential family. So Joseph Ellicott had 8 other siblings, and basically the women either married a Brown, or the men married a Brown and the women married an Evans almost exclusively.
Gotcha. And then they kind of stayed within the family business of, land speculation.
And several of those siblings came up here to Western New York. They were originally from Philadelphia and Maryland.
Okay.
Some of them came up here and settled and stayed.
Right.
But we then have 1836, 1837, what has been affectionately called the Land Office War, in which settlers start to rise up and fight against the collection policies. They actually burned down the office in Mayville, thinking, hey, we destroyed all record of our debts, we're good. And everything was duplicated and sent back to Batavia, so they didn't really destroy anything except the building. But the stone vault is still there. And then they try to do the same thing to the office here in Batavia. A few hundred people marched on the building. They were actually barricaded inside with weapons.
Wow.
This was a full siege until the sheriff and the militia showed up and everybody thought better of it and went home before anything happened. So it's probably the most bloodless war in history. Nobody was really injured. Some people got tar and feathered, but that was about the extent of it.
Just that. It's interesting to think about sort of at these early stages of America, like, really was mob justice sometimes, of when things were starting to get settled out and disputed like this, that
It
people
was hard
often
to
took-
maintain order because you had very few people there to maintain order.
Right.
If things got out of hand. So by 1837, and then it stretches into the 1840s, the Holland Land Company is really getting out of Dodge.
Yeah.
And sending everything back to Amsterdam and selling off what they can. The Holland Land Office here in Batavia stays as a land office for a few more years before it was eventually bought in 1852 to become a school.
Right, yeah, we had a school there.
So the land company history sort of ends with that in terms of an official business capacity. But it comes back in 1894 as a museum. So it works out well in that sense. But the Holland Land Company is at the center of everything that happens in terms of the development of our area of West New York.
Yeah.
It doesn't grow the way it does without the land company's money and influence. Yes, it was done to gain money. It was not done because they wanted to help people. So the altruistic aspect of it isn't there, but
Yeah.
you know, it's still, they are the reason why the area develops.
Nevertheless, they are the birthplace of Western New York, and that's what we are here today.
Exactly. So that now you understand why we call ourselves that.
Yeah. That's a great history there, Ryan. Thank you very much for sharing. Another good episode.
Well, thank you everybody for joining with us, and we hope you stick around for the next one.